So this is always a highlight of the year. It's nice to come just before Christmas, see great sport, and catch up with everyone and
get to say hi to everyone, just generally have a brilliant time. So I want to delve a little bit into the past here. So how and why did you start the Mount St John Stud? Because it is quite literally so iconic now.
Thank you. I suppose it came about in a slightly different way to most studs. A lot of studs, well known, are passed on through multi-generations and have been going for decades or longer. But my parents aren't actually riders, and so I started it myself, but it just came from being horse crazy from a young child and starting to ride at the local riding school when I was 8, and then it kind of progressed. And when I was 18 and finished school, before I went to university, I went to work in Australia on a very big stud that was actually having 150 foals a year. And there I really got interested in the breeding. Had my first experience of an embryo transfer offspring, which was very early in those days, because it was probably, that was an embryo that would have been made 25 years ago. So that was very, very early days for embryo transfer. And I was then fascinated by it. My first dressage horse, by coincidence, was a mare. And so then I thought I could apply the embryo transfer that I'd experienced and seen in Australia and some of the breeding with her. So that's how it all started. And then I purposefully went into choosing mares for the riding that could simultaneously have foals by embryo transfer. So that's really, I suppose, the concept. And then that was very much honed through when I'd finished my travelling in Australia. I did actually go and start university. I went and did pure business studies, nothing equestrian at all, because that was the focus. And my parents at that time still wanted the horses to be more of a hobby than a career.
How wrong they were.
And I was quite determined, but I did my business management degree and managed to wangle everything as much as I could to being horse related. So the Manchester lecturers and business studies team learned a lot about horses and reproduction, probably a lot more than they ever imagined. And my dissertation, I was very lucky, and I had a very good supervisor, and I was able to do the advancements in equine reproduction throughout history, covering everything from AI, freezing semen, transporting, freezing embryos, all the way through to the extremes of cloning. So I covered all aspects and advancements in equine reproductive technology. And then I looked for the business application of it for how that could impact the sport and the breeding industry. And so this is now a study that I did 12 years ago. And obviously the market has evolved a lot in the last 12 years, but it was really nice to explore that and spend the best part of a year studying that topic, interviewing some incredible people and learning a lot about the techniques in quite a lot of detail. And so then I felt like I really had this technical knowledge of what was required from the breeding in quite a specific way that I could try and use from a business angle, which is why then we very much focused on the mares that could do the sport at the same time as the breeding by the technologies that we've seen, like the embryo transfer or ICSI and things like that.
Sorry, you just really piqued my interest there, like mentioning you did a bit of work on cloning and stuff like that. Would you ever consider doing a bit of cloning? Because I know I would personally like a freestyle, if you don't mind.
I mean, we've never cloned anything. It's really, it's one of those topics that's very Marmite, and so it really polarizes people.
I know, I just promised you I wasn't going to ask anything controversial then as well, didn't I? Sorry.
It's, I studied it, I had to learn about it because I had to cover everything. We've never done it and we haven't proposed to do it. I wouldn't ever say never, because I think if you say things like that, then you hold yourself to it, and I am very much about integrity, so I would never want to say something that I then couldn't fully stand to myself.
I really respect that, yeah, cool.
But at this time, no. But yeah, I do think the study was really interesting and really helped me learn a lot about the different aspects of what could be done. And then it was trying to apply that into a business sense.
It's quite interesting to see the amount of work that went into it before Mount St John Stud was ever even born.
Yeah.
You were like proper getting in there, weren't you?
Yeah, I was very lucky because from the dissertation, the supervisor for that actually put me forward to stay on at Manchester to do a master's and gave me a full scholarship to stay. And I only wanted to go home and do the horses and start my business, but I didn't have a business plan. I just wanted to do horses. That was my idea. And so I actually stayed and did a year's master's in entrepreneurship, which basically was how to create the business plan, the marketing plan, the financial plan, create the brand, and everything to start the business. And that was done at university. And so the business plan that I follow today was very much what I spent a year convincing Manchester Business School lecturers that it was a viable thing to do, that had no interest in horses whatsoever. And I was in with other people that were doing textiles and computer games and all different businesses.
Well, it's a good job you convinced them.
I think
look where you've come now.
There was a few adaptations, but yeah, it was really, really good for me to learn how to hone in on things. And at the time, I was very much in a typical young, open-minded, looking for different opportunities. But it really helped me focus on something and say, what do we want to represent and what will we stand for? And for me, that was mares in sport that could also breed and prove that they could be as desirable, if not more, than the stallions.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, you are very highly decorated yourself, and you're obviously very interested in dressage. But was there ever a point where you were like, I'm going to breed a top show jumper or something like that?
I do occasionally get distracted, may not be the word, but overexcited. So I have actually bred a couple of show jumpers. And one of them is actually with Paul Sims, who I think was joint second in the
amazing.
And so yeah, I don't like doing anything by half, but she's only 5.
You're either breeding world beaters or nothing, aren't you?
I like to aim high. It's nice to have a good standard and try and aim for things. And I really like working with top riders. So Paul, I would definitely put in that category. And it's very new, my relationship with Paul, in terms of having the horses there. That's just from this year, and really, really proud and pleased to work with somebody like him.
And I mean, we can see that, and you are picking some of the most amazing riders in the world. I mean, you've got your horses in world rankings. Catherine Freestyle just won the Lobster top 10. Horses even on home soil have got national and regional titles all over the place. So what is your secret to success?
I think there's lots of different things that come in over the years, but for me, one of the biggest things is really the team and building a really, really strong team. And so I like to work with riders that have the same philosophy, where the horse comes first and their well-being and their individual needs is what is focus for them, rather than saying this is what I do and this horse has to fit that system. And obviously talented riders that are achieving something, but I also work with riders and have worked with many riders that have never done a dressage test before, and often then they go on and a year or two have been with us in the team, then they might have won the national championships and things. So I like to see that they've got ambition.
Have you got space for another one? Asking for a friend.
So I really like ambition, I like competitiveness, but I really like curiosity. And I like that both in people and horses. So I think you need everyone to be interested in how they can develop and wanting to continue that development. Because there's loads of talented people and horses that start off super talented but never really had to try for it. And so those ones sometimes don't actually really achieve the highest levels because they always had it easy before, and so they never had to work hard. And I really like the people or horses that are not the absolute top movers or the best natural talent, but that are very good and then work really hard, because they really are the ones that then go the furthest.
Well, you know that they'll go that extra mile for you. They'll put their heart and soul into it every single time, whether it's the horse or the rider.
Yeah, and I think that's it. For me personally, it's more enjoyable to work with a team like that. So yeah, we have very much the team aspect, the similar philosophy for how it should be, and then also just people that really want to do it and have fun.
And is that how the pairing of Catherine and freestyle came about? Because I remember being on Instagram and seeing that video that you guys did popping up, and I was like, oh my gosh, the gauntlet has been thrown. This is so cool. So, like, how did that come about, that particular pairing?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, I've obviously followed and respected Catherine for a very long time, and she is an incredible rider. She's one of the best riders in the world. And I really loved her story with Cassidy, from him being a young horse and her being a young rider all the way through. And you can really clearly see through her social media how much she loves him and how much she's nurtured him through those levels and up to the age he is. And so that for me was something that was really a nice relationship. And she was obviously without a horse at that moment and was actively looking for something to be back out in the team. But hadn't quite found the right thing. And at that same moment, that was when freestyle was then back to fitness after she'd been off with her injury. And I sort of really wanted to take the moment to be able to do a Grand Prix myself to prove that she was fit, and I'd never quite got the chance to do that level. So that was a really nice personal goal and achievement that I could do together with her. And yeah, I think just after I'd done my competition, then a friend of mine who's a mutual friend who actually lives only 15 minutes from Catherine came to visit me, and she said, I really need to make this connection happen. And so it was actually through my good friend Lola Berg Henriksen, and so she put us together, and
we have Lola to thank for everything.
Exactly, yeah.
I also, just piggybacking off what you said there, the breeding top horses that are at the top levels, how come that it took freestyle for you to make that step to Grand Prix? You said that you never really got the chance to ride at that level.
I think for me the business is first before my competing.
Because I mean, people sitting around would think, oh, you must be able to just jump on any one of your horses and do one.
Yes and no. I mean, obviously running any business is a big responsibility and takes a lot of time. And it's quite a big business now and spread all across Europe, certainly, but also internationally. So I travel a lot, and so my horses that I ride have to very much fit around that. And if there's a big stallion event that I have to go to for the breeding, if there's another show abroad for one of the international horses that's competing, then I want to be there and see them compete. So my horses always have to take a back step on that. So my riding I enjoy, and I love to be really competitive when I do it, but it's not my top priority at this moment in time over the breeding part and the other parts of the business.
Well, it sounds like you've got your priorities straight, because as we keep saying, you are doing fantastically. Then speaking about breeding, what does the future of the sport look like when it comes to breeding?
So,
sorry, that's a loaded question.
I think the sport is changing a lot. I think this year has been a really emotional year for a lot of people in a lot of ways, and I think that has been challenging, but also very provoking, and some people put barriers up and other people open doors, and other people go more into training and trying to be open-minded. And I've always tried to be open-minded with everything and continue learning, and I think that's really important, because what we knew a year ago, let alone 10 years ago, is hopefully quite outdated today, because the scientists, there's new research, there's new product development coming out all the time, and that's great for the whole industry, whether that's in bits or saddles or technical clothing or shoes or whatever, nutrition for the horse, and all of that is key. And if we just choose to learn from our parents' generation or our trainers' generation, and their knowledge is based on somebody, the generation before that trained them, we're easily 20 or 30 years out of date with that knowledge. And so for me, it's very much about staying up to date without getting faddy, but trying to stay up to date with the latest information, and then choose where and how that best applies. So for me now, the changes in the sport is really making a lot of people that have some got outdated knowledge really look and say, is that relevant in today's world or appropriate now, or could it be better? And I think for a lot of people and a lot of aspects, all of us need to look at everything, whether it's the nutrition, and there's a lot of room for improvement all the time. So I do think that's where the sport's going now.
Yes, so it's a case of continued learning, continued innovation, and not getting stale and stuck.
Yeah, definitely. And I think now with that, there will be shake-ups in the judging, in the use of AI, whether that's through computer playback or where the AI takes over part of the judging, like it already is with the freestyles tonight. All of their floor plans go through a computer that tells the judges how the degree of difficulty is. The judge doesn't get to decide that's a 10 or a 9 or a 9.5. That has developed in the last couple of years. And I think lots of things like that will start to come in where it will remove some of the bias in terms of the judging part, and it will make it much more streamlined and consistent. And don't get me wrong, I have huge respect for judges. I think it's a really, really hard job to judge. I've only done it once as a guest judge, and it was really, really challenging. And
not fancying a career in that then?
Will definitely not be quickly moving to that career, but I really, really think it's a really hard job. And I do respect the judges a lot for doing it, but there's a lot of things to think about in a very short space of time with a lot of horses, and each one has to have a comment and a mark. And when you go to something like the Olympics in Paris with 100 horses in 40 degrees, that's really, really not easy to do.
And I certainly don't envy them myself. I just did want to ask you as well, when it comes to breeding, and obviously you've got this very incredible mindset towards it, does that ever come into the equation? Like, is there something different that you look for in your stallions versus your mares? And how important are the stallions versus your mares when it comes to breeding? Because obviously we hear a lot about your mares. I think that's probably because freestyle's one of my favourites.
Yeah, I think for me, when I'm choosing I can start easier when I'm choosing the mares. So when we first started the business, then we were obviously buying mares because I didn't inherit genetics in previous generations. So we started with a couple of riding horses and actually some foals. So my first riding horses were 2 mares, and then I actually bought Freestyle as my first foal to go together with the first foal I bred from one of those mares, which I didn't want to grow up on her own. And I happened to have a filly, so then it needed a female friend. So Freestyle was that friend. And so we started kind of at the 2 ends, thinking that then we've got a couple of older mares that were like school mistresses for me, and I also then ended up buying a couple of very old brood mares that were towards the end of their careers that would hopefully be retired as the foals were reaching maturity to breed from. And that was how the business really started with the breeding. And it was having at the start 1 foal a year while I was a student, and then adding 1 or 2 that I bought as foals. And completely by coincidence, for the first 4 years of breeding from this one mare, we only had fillies. And my dad was completely convinced, because I'd done this course on the reproduction and I'd written a business plan that said I sold no fillies, and I sold all the colts and kept all the fillies. And so I just bred filly after filly, and he thought that the vets were doing sex semen, and they weren't. It was pure coincidence.
Your dad was coming out with conspiracy theories.
But I really like that first mare, and she's been very, very special for us. And that was Deja Vu. And she produced what was our first homebred Grand Prix horse, who did that last year. And that was very exciting.
And how do you decide which ones are going to be the brood mares and which ones are going to be the competitive horses? Or is it a case where, for example, is Freestyle going to go off and be a mum after this year? Like, how do you decide which ones are going to stay back and be bred and which ones are going to be out and about in the world?
I need to answer that, and then don't let me forget about the stallion bit, because I didn't answer that from the last question.
Oh, okay, yeah. We'll come back to stallions. So we're more interested in girls, you see.
For choosing the which ones to breed and which ones to ride, generally most of them go into the sport. So our philosophy is the breeding combined with sport. And for me, the further they go in the sport, the better I can select the right stallion to match, to choose how to counteract her weaknesses, because for me the only weakness that's relevant is the weaknesses that come out in the sport, because that's what we're breeding for. And so the further they go in the sport, the further we can gain information and knowledge on what their strengths and weaknesses are for that role. And so then I would try to loop it back to the stallions, to use stallions that counteract that and that are able to have strong heritability of those traits that I was missing or wanted to improve from the mare. So one of the really important things when I look for a stallion is a lot of very good sport horses are beautifully trained, ridden and presented. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you will get that beautiful presentation and training and rider to come with you when you breed to that said stallion. And I think that's something to be really mindful of when you're choosing your stallions. And so there's kind of a double-edged sword, because as a breeder, from a commercial perspective, we want to use stallions that are out there and successful. And often the top riders are the successful ones. On another side, from a breeding aspect, we want to use the stallions that are naturally the most talented, not only talented because they have Lottie or whoever riding them that are the superstar riders as well. And so it's very hard to get a balance between, but I really look generally in the breeding for the natural talent so that I can add that into the breeding program and hopefully have something even better than the mare that I'd started with the breeding. And there's something called a heritability index, whereby a stallion or mare could have specific traits themselves, but they don't necessarily pass them on consistently. But there could be other traits that are very reliably passed on. And it could be anything from the size of the hooves or the character or something to do with their behavior or walk length. It could be anything. And they could have it themselves but not pass it on, or they could have it themselves and very consistently pass it on. So when I'm choosing a stallion with the traits that I want to improve on my mare, I want to know that there's a very strong chance that he does pass that characteristic on. And so that's the heritability index. And you get that, the Oldenburg stud book and the KWPN stud book are the most advanced in terms of actually now, over the last few years, documenting that. So you can get charts and graphs that show that from a conformational and movement perspective.
Actually really cool.
It doesn't bring in the character, which I also think is very important, but I do sometimes check those charts. If I was looking for something, say, with different feet, you know, it's hard to spend loads of time going around all the stallion stations and then going to see all the offspring from those stallions to check that they did have bigger feet than the mare that you had with small feet to hopefully improve it. So I can look on a chart and say, yes, it's got bigger feet, because I don't want to breed something with small feet to the mare that's already got small feet if that's been some sort of issue.
A bit like if you've got a mare with a short neck, you don't want a stallion with a short neck.
Yeah. So that's where I would use the stallion information to come in. But to be honest, from my perspective, I spend so much of my time going around all the shows, whether it's at this level or the young horse shows.
You probably already know.
Or the stallions, that I kind of absorb a lot of that information. And for me, it's interesting to see the stallion, but the most interesting for me is to see the offspring of that stallion, because then I know what is passed on.
And I mean, do you ever sometimes think, I don't know, I kind of just really want to breed this? Do you ever play Russian roulette with your stallions, or are you like, no, this is technical?
Yeah, oh no, I do, yeah. I mean, we've got a lot of mares I can choose.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has favourite stallions, and I'm lucky that we've got quite a lot of mares. So to be honest, I probably do have a mare to fit every different type of stallion. So we're not pigeonholed into only having big, rangy, loose mares or something like that. Like, I really do have a full range, and I enjoy that, and I like trying to breed the best I can from each different mare to get quite a lot of variety.
Yes, and can we also talk a little bit about how the UK is developing sport for breeding? Like, what kind of stuff is the UK producing at the minute that shows off all the different breeding and essentially Mount St John progeny?
I think British breeding and British dressage is very exciting at the moment. I think Becky's here somewhere because she's on after me, and obviously a great win yesterday. Very, very exciting year in the sport. I mean, Becky's been fantastic for years, obviously in British dressage, but the international scene didn't know her, and now they very much do.
Now they've met her.
So that's very exciting for Becky. But yeah, I think all of British equestrian has really, especially in the dressage scene, has sort of leapfrogged since 2012. And so that was when we were first getting the gold medals, and that stayed really consistent, and it's been great now to see even a new chapter this season. And I think it's really, really exciting. Alongside that, I think there's been a big push for the breeding to level up. I've really enjoyed hopefully being a part of that, and I very much spend a lot of time in Europe, so that's my sort of benchmark and focus. They are world leading for the breeding. The Germans are so much more established and so much bigger, but I spend a lot of time in Denmark and Holland as well. And I think then I've got a very realistic view of the whole breeding globally for the dressage, and I think that's really important to stay up to date and knowledgeable on that. And I spend a lot of time speaking to the breeders and the riders for the young horses and the breaking riders and the handlers. A couple of weeks ago I was just at the stallion event. We've just had the German stallion season, really. So it was the Hanoverians and the Westphalians, and then coming up in January is the Oldenburg, but I was over for that. And we had one of our stallions that was the third generation of our breeding from our first mare, who actually got the reserve champion. So that was really exciting in the Westphalian stud book, and really nice to see that sort of level of success against some of the counterparts. And then it was actually a German stud that bid and outbid another German stud to buy him to stand for their breeding station for next year. So that's really nice sort of recognition now for the stud coming through.
I mean, you deserve all sorts of recognition. Just one very last question before I let you go, so you can actually get to enjoy some of the show today. But for anyone that was thinking about maybe starting their own studs or going out on a limb and giving it a go, what advice would you give them?
I think for me, I did obviously get the massive opportunity to plan it, and to put a lot of time into planning it and explaining that to not just your close friends and family that generally are going to be probably either very kind or brutally honest to you, but to actually independent people that probably know nothing about horses or what you're doing, to really explain why you're doing it and what it is. Because if you can justify it to them, then probably may tweak a couple of things to then represent, but you then know that you've got a good case of something. But I think then once you start, it is really hard work. You know, it's not just a lovely time cruising around. You know, I mean, it's lovely talking about the great bits, but there's also, sadly, with any animal breeding, it doesn't always go well. You know, there is deaths, there is sad days, and that's just an inevitable part of livestock and animals and births. And anybody that works in any sort of animal hospital or human hospital realises that it is a risky thing. And so that is very emotional, it is really stressful, and it isn't all plain sailing, even when you have educated yourself or have a very, very good team around. And so it is important to be realistic and emotionally resilient for those sort of things. But I think with that, it also is important to then celebrate the successes, because like with freestyle, I mean, she was meant to go to the Tokyo Olympics, and then having beaten Jessica at the last event to qualify, she was injured and couldn't go. So going this year was extra special, to be honest, because we never knew she'd even get in the arena again. And so for us now, having her at the world #1 is incredible. But for me, every time she goes to a show, it is super special, because it feels almost like borrowed time. And, you know, I think those sort of things are so important, to just recognise those moments and what really can be achieved when you stay focused and dedicated to something. And, just stay on your track of what you believe in and want to achieve.
Well, those are some seriously wise words, Emma. Thank you